My name is David Hitchcock. I'm chair of the Department of World Languages and Cultures. Today I'm honored to introduce our distinguished scholar lecturer speaker, who comes to us thanks to the support provided by the College of Liberal Arts for a lecture series, annual lecture series aimed at drawing attention to one or more of the disciplines within the liberal arts, and with an eye to bringing to the general public and to faculty and students a clear example of high intellectual achievement, something I'm sure that you will find our speaker more than able to do. Programs, by definition, are of general humanistic appeal with interdisciplinary topics, and the speaker is asked to make one public presentation and one presentation to students. We had the privilege of spending time together at 11 o'clock with 3 classes here, and are very happy that you are here. So thank you all for coming out. Our guest is the Director of Global Education Initiatives at IU Bloomington. Her educational background is very impressive. She earned a BA in English Language and Literature at St. Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje, Macedonia, and in the United States came to do her graduate work, her Master of Education. She earned at Boston University in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And finally, she earned her Doctor of Philosophy, the PhD in Literacy, Culture, and Language Education. Her areas of expertise are language education, teacher reflection, dual language immersion, global education, and language teaching. We're very excited to have her here as a distinguished scholar. She certainly has acquitted herself very well with many publications. Most recent of note is in an area somewhat outside of language, but certainly very globally oriented. She co-authored in 2023 a publication with Springer called Internationalizing Rural Science Teacher Preparation, Action Research for Global Competency. So I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Vesna Dimitrieska.
Thank you. So thank you all for being here. I'm extremely honored to be a part of this series and to spend the afternoon with you. I know how busy you must all be, and I really appreciate you being here today. A little about myself. I'm very passionate about language learning, and I'm glad that I get the chance to transfer that passion in the work that I do. That does involve a lot of different things related to global competence, but I originally am from the Republic of Macedonia, now called North Macedonia, but a former Yugoslav republic that is in the southeastern part of Europe, where, as many parts of Europe, bilingualism and monolingualism is the norm. And I won't go over all of these things, but I am trilingual. Macedonian is my first language, and then I do speak Serbian because of Yugoslavia, and of course English. That's my favorite place in my country. It's a place called Ohrid. It's a place where they have a lot of churches and monasteries, and it's on Ohrid Lake, which is a UNESCO site, a very beautiful place, which gives me tranquility, and I always get reminded, so that's why I wanted to share that with you too. I've also, professionally, I have worked with teachers all over the world, but my context here in the United States has been it started as a graduate student, in fact, at IU, when I was a coordinator for this project, which is called Bridges, World Languages Children, and it offers exploratory language learning at various community sites to young learners. So it's free. The only person that gets paid is the coordinator of this program, and there are about 40 people that work on it, but it is kind of like a 3-part partnership, because the volunteers who are teaching in the program, since the language that they teach is exploratory by nature, there is no expectation to have high proficiency levels of these languages. So the teachers are volunteers who are either heritage speakers of those languages, who may be students at IU, or students at IU who are learning those languages. So for them, it is a way to practice the language in a meaningful way while they're also learning it. Also, the languages that are offered are less commonly taught languages. So it's not German, Spanish, or that you typically see in language, or that are very common here in the United States. And the idea with this is that students at a young age are exposed to learning a language through games, play and song, so that maybe when they are older, they can come back and learn some of these languages and remember those days when they were learning them as a kid and that it was a positive learning experience. What is also great about it is that it's offered at the public libraries, at after-school sites like the Girls and Boys Club, and then most recently they started offering it at schools' after-school programs. So sometimes parents don't even know that their kids are taking this, but it also it exposes them to different cultures and languages, because I think many students do not get that kind of an experience. So that's how it all started. But then I also, after getting my graduate degree, I have been teaching in the teacher prep program at IU in the School of Education to students who are getting their ESL or ENL licenses and certifications, or world language teachers. But most of the work that I do is supporting the growing number of dual language programs across the state of Indiana, and I'll talk about those a little later. And of course, I do a lot of advocacy for early language learning. From the part of the world where I come from, this is not like it's a non-thing. Like no one convinces people that you need to learn other languages. But I feel here there is a need, although things are changing, more and more people want their children to be bi or multilingual. But I still think that there's this notion throughout all these experiences that here in the United States, K through 6 second language learning is often seen as a privilege, because where these programs are placed, it's a matter of who created them and why. Is it the parents, because the parents wanted it, or is it because people needed it? So there are a lot of issues. So that's why I think that K through 6 is still seen, second language learning is seen as a privilege. So what kind of realities are we facing? I'll talk a little bit more about that, but there are a lot of myths and misconceptions that we face. I feel like everyone is an expert on language education and tells how we should teach or learn languages. I don't go around and tell people how to teach math or science, right? We know what we should be doing, but it is also an issue related to access. Who has access to these types of programs? Some of you may be familiar with this. It's a report that the American Academy of Arts and Sciences released in 2017, and it was this urgent call to have more bilingual and multilingual people in the United States, because what it showed that only 20% of the Americans speak a language other than English well. And as a contrast, 65% of the world is either bi or multilingual. So there was this call that if we want to catch up with the rest of the world, we need more people to speak other languages. Also, there are some more facts that currently there are 5 million students who are learning English as a second language here in the American educational system. But at the same time, there is no, as you probably know, there is no federal mandate for learning languages. So that's why the decisions about when to start with language learning or what language you want to introduce are often left to states and very often to districts. Also, only 20% of K-12 students are learning a foreign language, and as a contrast, 92% of their peers in the European countries are doing so. At the same time, we have been seeing a decrease in enrollments in world language programs at university level, whereas in the US market, there is a rising demand for bilingual. Employers want more bilingual people. So there's this disconnect. There's like something positive, something negative, things are changing. But yeah, and then there's even information that about 2 billion is lost annually because of language and cultural misunderstanding. That's a lot of money. Also, in 2008, only 25% of US elementary schools offered a foreign language class. And you see that it's like in 2008, and this is not because I didn't do my research. It's because no one knows, no one tracks these things. It's either self-reported, people claim that they do, and we don't know if they do it or how they're doing it. And there isn't a system in which people can track what is happening, because there isn't a federal mandate for that. So there is a positive outlook though, because in the 1980s, only 11% of people spoke a language other than English at home, and now that's grown to almost 22% in 2018. And these are the top 5 languages for which here in the United States there are more than 1 million people. You might not be surprised in Spanish. is one of them, then Chinese. I was surprised by Tagalog and Vietnamese, so but even though I've been doing this, I always constantly get surprised by many of these numbers and information because not many people know this. I mean, my own country, Macedonia, has 2 million people, so it's like there are more, Tagalog speakers here than there are citizens of Macedonia, in Macedonia. But yeah, and then at the same time here in the United States, there are more Spanish speakers here who speak Spanish at home in the U.S. than in any country in Latin America except for Mexico, Colombia, or Argentina. And then at the same time, of those who do speak a foreign language at home, 45% were born here in the United States. So what does that mean? Is that their foreign language or is that their home language, right? Because they speak it at home, that's their first language. And this also, talking about the different varieties of Spanish, we cannot help but wonder, well, what variety of Spanish is the right one or the correct one? Because if I'm from, we earlier spoke with the students at 11 o'clock that is the Spanish from Spain the only right Spanish, or if I come from another Spanish-speaking country, how would I feel that if my Mexican Spanish is not good enough, or what are you saying, that my language is not good or not right? So those are some of the things that we are facing, or even the myth of the native speaker. Obviously, I'm a non-native speaker of English, and I've felt what it is that it wasn't too long ago that people, and they still do, prefer native speakers of languages. But sometimes a non-native speaker can be a better teacher of that language because they've gone through that same experience as a language learner. So there are all these different realities that we are facing, and it's not always so black and white. Yeah, but at the same time, there are some things some AI things that are emerging that some people think of as threats. I don't know what you personally think about them, but I don't, and we'll talk about that in a minute why. Maybe 10 days ago I was worried about them, but not anymore after I tried some things with Claude. But yeah, my partner kept like saying Claude. I'm like, who is Claude? And it is the AI that he's been using, and he's obsessed with it, so that's how I got to try it out, and now I'm a convert, but yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. Also here in the United States, we often hear that people say, well, there is no need. We don't need to learn another language, or people don't need to speak another language. When in fact, there are a lot of calls, and in addition to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, there is a need here for more medical interpreters, so that Chinese migrants can get the services that they need when they go to the hospitals. I don't know also how familiar you are, but here in Indiana, it wasn't that long ago, it was a few years ago, that kids were used in hospitals to translate for their parents. And you can imagine, like if someone is going through, if a kid has to tell their parent, you have something, or this should be your treatment, or you have this much to live. Fortunately, a law was passed that that's no longer legal, and people need to have medical interpreters. So that's where this comes from, but it's also a national need. It's not just here in Indiana. This was from this magazine that I came across. And you'll notice I wanted to see the date too, because this is now in January that there will be more bilingual school psychologists. So there is a need. It's just that people either choose not to see it or not to address it, or it's not, I think, spoken about enough. So here in Indiana, and I know that some of my colleagues here from USI may have been a part of this project. It was in 2017, a group of colleagues of mine from IU started this project called Indiana Language Roadmap. And the idea was that people from education, from the health system, the government, the legal sector, we all came together and we spoke what is out there in terms of language offerings and what we need to do or offer more so that we meet a need that is out there. And in fact, one of the things that I happen to know about the medical interpreters in Indiana was through this roadmap. If you Google Indiana Language Roadmap, you can find it easily. Some of the information is not maybe a little outdated, but it's still, there is some good information. And you'll see that 1 in 5 of Indiana jobs are supported by international trade. And these are the top 5 countries that own companies here in Indiana. This is like some data about exports. And what this roadmap also showed that there are 275 different languages are are spoken in Indiana. The question is how many of those are taught in schools. We know that for someone to become better at English, if we want them to improve their English, their first language needs to be developed. And I'm not saying that if there are two speakers of a language, I know when I used in Bloomington there are two Macedonians, so we always joke like I'm 50% of Macedonians in town. But we're not saying that Macedonian should be introduced, but there are communities that of certain languages of which there are a lot of numbers. So that's when we want to introduce that language in the schools so that those kids become better at English. I know that's counterintuitive to some people, but research shows that if our first language is well developed, it'll be much easier to develop our second or third and so languages. As a contrast, we know that here people are lucky if they start with language learning in middle school. It's primarily high school, but in 21 of the top 25 industrialized countries, language instruction starts in elementary school. But who is in our classrooms? Because of global migration and global trends, global migration is at our highest level ever, speaking in historic periods. That's why our classrooms are very different from what they looked maybe when our parents were in those classrooms. So we have monolingual students who only speak one language. We also have students who may have acquired two languages from birth. Some of these categories may overlap, and you'll see in a minute. Some of them are balanced bilinguals who know two languages equally well across the different registers. Some of them are English dominant students. Some of them may be sequential bilingual students who have acquired a second language after the age of 5. Then some of them might be heritage learners. Some of them might be English learners who don't know English well. And then some of them might be internationally adopted children. When we think about all of these categories of children, they all have their own characteristics and ways of learning languages and learning in general. And we if we are teachers or if we are learning to become teachers, are faced with all these realities, and we might not know how to meet the needs of all these different students we might have in one single classroom. I'm not sure if you've heard of this distinction between weird and non-weird societies. No? WEIRD stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich Democracies. And that's the book if you are interested to learn more about it. But it is, and then only 4% of the global population is weird. Western, educated, industrialized, and rich. Whereas 96% is non-weird. When it comes to behavioral psychology research, most of that research is done, like 88% of the research is done on weird populations. And then the information that we get from research done on in weird societies is used on non-weird people. So what are the implications of that, right? We're using some measures or we're using some types of tools or assessments that have not been made for the people that we're using them on. So I thought it was interesting, and this, for us in language learning, I think, especially for English learners, it's an issue because we are using assessments that have been developed for monolingual English dominant English speaking people on multilingual learners. And it's like comparing apples and oranges because we're just seeing one side of the coin if we're using an assessment that has been developed with monolinguals in mind. Also, how do we treat those people who speak a language other than English here in the United States? So primarily they were called limited English speaking ability. Then in the 78, like in the late 70s, it was limited English proficient. Fortunately, at the beginning of this century, they started to be called English language learners, and then most recently, they're called English learners. So although the first two, we can definitely see the negative connotation of the term, the other two are equally bad, right? Because we only think about their English, and we say, well, their English is not good enough, and that's why we're calling them English learners. We don't care if they speak 2 or 3 or maybe more languages, right? Because some of our students may come even from, I know some of them here in Indiana may come with dialects or maybe indigenous languages that is not Spanish. So what does that mean about the terms that we're using? So all of these show know that, as I mentioned before, are the not so good terms. From the federal requirements, they are referred to as English learners. But more and more, there are these emerging terms that are called emergent bilingual and multilingual learners that are more appreciative of all the languages that these students are speaking. Because even though they may not be good at English, by calling them emergent bilinguals, we are recognizing they're maybe not good at English because they speak two or more other languages. So it shows that, and also the same is for multilingual learners. So it shows that the first four are kind of representative of that deficit perspective of thinking of things, that like, well, they don't know English enough and that's the end of the story. Whereas these other ones, yeah, they don't know English, but they know other languages. And I was recently in a professional development when they were talking about assessment for these emergent bilinguals, how we should be looking at it as if it's a waterfall. And we know it like in a waterfall, there could be one waterfall with all the things that they know in one language and another one in English. And then when we assess them, which one do we assess? Because they both go into the same pool of water. So if they know 3 colors in Spanish and then 5 in English, they know 8 colors, right? They can recognize 8 different colors. It's not just 5 colors that they know in English. So it's a lot of these things that we, as language educators, need to convince people and say, well, yes, but no, that's not really the case. And that's why I'm really grateful that I get to talk to you about all these things today, because, yeah, I think they're worth talking about. There are also some dominant views and misconceptions, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of the time, people think that language in the mind is a zero-sum game, that language is like a shoebox, and then if I add another language, I'll take up some space from science or from math. Fortunately, for all of us, language ability, brain ability, capacity is limitless. So we can add as many languages as we want at no cost for other content areas. In fact, if we are bi or multilingual, it would help even those other content areas. Also, as a country, there's a notion that there is only one space here in this country for just one language, and that language should be English. We know from countries like Switzerland and Canada that that's not really, that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't be afraid of that. Very often we also hear that children are like sponges. Oh, they'll just pick up the language and it'll be great. This is partially true, but then also if they don't use it, they will lose that ability. Also, some people think that language learning just happens instinctually. Just drop them in that area, like the immersion context, and they'll get it or they'll acquire it. This is also partially true, but there has to be some effort. There has to be direct instruction in that language too. Also, another one is that language is frozen, that if you acquire one language once in your lifetime, that's it, you'll know it. Those of us who are bi or multilingual know how fragile language ability is, and then if you don't use it, it will be hard for you to retrieve that other second or third language that you may have learned some other time. And then that other notion, again, that language is extra, that it's a luxury, we don't need it. I think with many of the reports and some of the other things that I'll talk about in a minute, we will see that that's not really now the case. Maybe that was the case because it was perceived that only people who would travel abroad should or should learn or want to learn another language. But now things are changing because our classrooms we already have people who speak multiple languages. There are some more myths too, that learning 2 languages in early childhood will delay their English, and also that native English speakers may experience language delays when they're into a language progress. There is no evidence for this. People just say this, but there's no research evidence that supports this. From research done about the neurocognitive consequences of bilingualism, there is no evidence that bilingual children experience diminished cognitive abilities. In fact, they do experience enhanced cognitive abilities, and those are listed there, I won't read them all, but those cognitive abilities can only be achieved if they have full competence in both languages. So it's not enough if a kid is in a program for like 3 years. They have to be proficient enough in both languages so that they can reap the benefits of all of these things. So that's why, like a lifelong, I think, not commitment, but a lifelong willingness to learn languages is what we want. Yeah, and then we also have heard, I think, lately that people who are bilingual may have a delayed onset of dementia. So I thought that this was funny. I knew that I would use it sometimes. I saw it on some social media, and I'm like, yeah, this is a great one to use sometimes in a talk, so now it's time for that cave. These levels, A1, A2, B1, B2, are from the European counterpart for ACTFL. They're from the Common European Framework for Languages. So it shows like what people can do in the different languages. I thought it was funny that, yeah. And students could be, I mean, I'm not, it's a joke, but it's that people need to know what their A1 level should or can look like. What B1 means, or what are all the things that they can do. Yeah. So some people are worried about English. They are worried that, well, if more people speak all these other languages, my English will die, or what will happen to English? English is the language of power all over the world, and that's why many people, in fact, choose not to learn other languages. But here, this research is from Silvana Montul. She works with heritage speakers. And in this table, HL stands for heritage language, and ML stands for majority language. And the first column are the different generations of immigrants. First generation, generation 1.5, second and third. The second one shows the language dominance in adulthood. So, and then the third one shows the language proficiency across the different generations. So we can see that the first generation, as expected, is dominant in the heritage language. And they have native proficiency, but low to high proficiency in the majority language here in the United States. Starting from even generation 1.5, the kids who were born in the home country, they are already beginning to be more proficient in the majority language than in their heritage language. And by the time they are we have second generation immigrants, they may even lose their heritage language. So, and I'm sure you may have seen this in some instances. You may know people and they say, well, I have German heritage, but I don't know anything German. Or my parents used to know some German, but now no one knows it. And this shows that. And this is another reason why we need to, if we already have heritage speakers of different languages, we should encourage, if we are even not able to offer those languages in school contexts, just to encourage them to keep them alive and to keep them using and learning those as well. So nothing will happen to English. English will be just fine. We should be worried about the other languages. This is some more research from second language acquisition that, and this is again one of those counterintuitive things that I mentioned at the beginning. If students' first language is well developed, their second language will be much easier to develop. So that's why we need to encourage, if someone is already speaking a language, have their parents at home engage in literacy practices in that language. And that's also counterintuitive to some of our immigrant parents. They think that, well, I want my kid to be better at English so that they're not picked on at school. When in fact, if we want them to become better at English, their literacy skills in their first language, whatever that is, need to be well developed. And these are things that we can easily educate parents about because they're counterintuitive. And that's why we also need that intentional, explicit, and systematic instruction that supports biliteracy development in both languages. As we have to, here as I've been talking from the beginning, the United States as a society is a monolingual society. And then I think we all should be empowered and should feel that we can make a difference to make that push from the monolingual towards the multilingual perspective. These are some examples of programs that are, called either subtractive or additive. Subtractive means that if we want them to become better at English, we just want them to become better at English, so we are subtracting the other language that they may be speaking. And then there are programs that are additive in which they have a first language, whatever that language is, and then we're adding a second one at no cost to the first one. In fact, we want both to develop. So, in books or in literature about bilingualism and multilingualism. The first one, immersion with no support, they sometimes call this like sink or swim. They put some immigrant speakers of other languages in the English classrooms with no support, and some of them sink, some of them swim. And then there are all these other types that you may have heard, like ESL pull-out, and when they're taken from content area classes outside with an ESL teacher to improve their English, while at the same time they're missing on some other things. There's also push-in when teachers come in. There are these transitional types of programs, but what we want more and more people to do is these dual language programs that are additive type of programs. Additive types of bilingual programs are also known as strong types of bilingualism, and in fact, world language is an additive program if if the second language is developed well enough so that people have like good proficiency in both. Very often, I'm sure I had multiple language teachers who told me like, well, switch off your Macedonian brain, turn off your English brain, and that's not really how languages function. When we are talking, even now as I'm speaking, all the languages that I speak, and even my beginner Spanish, are working in my head, even though what's coming out of my mouth is English. So we should stop thinking about us or about students as, two-headed monsters that like the two brains that we have, one for English and one for another language. But in fact, all the linguistic processes are operating at the same time. And this is why, for example, in these dual language programs that we have, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but the content should not be taught twice, the same content. So for example, if they are taught math in Spanish, the English teacher doesn't need to teach addition from scratch again. She only needs to teach the word for addition in Spanish because they know the concept of addition or subtraction or things like that. So that's why I think the benefit of these programs. This is another thing that I hate to bring this up, and I also don't like that the economic benefits seem to be the only thing that makes some people hear the value of languages. But if that's the only thing that works, we can give it to them. But I personally want to believe that there's so much richness and non-comparable benefit of learning another language. So, but what do employers want? Okay, this is from the Association of American Colleges and Universities, and they do this survey every 3 years, every 4 years, I think, and they ask American employers what they're looking for in when they're newly employed. So I don't know if you can see, but the black bars are employers that were surveyed in 2023, and the red ones are in 2018. So you can see, and these are ordered in terms of their prioritized. So we can see that employers value oral communication, they value adaptability and flexibility, they value working in teams, critical thinking, and yeah, so those are like the top 5. And at the same time, they ask them which of the skills is very important compared to which of the skills that they feel the students are not prepared to do. So you can see that oral communication was the top skill that they wanted, and also it's the top skill among which there is the biggest discrepancy, because they value oral communication, and they say only 49% is, they are very prepared, and then very important is the red one. I didn't mention that from the beginning. So we can see how there's this huge gap. And then the same goes for adaptability and flexibility. What I love is this last one, but I guess that makes perfect sense, because utilizing technology and digital media platforms, people think it's important, but people also think, yes, they're ready to do that. We don't need them to do more of that. So I think this is also another thing that you could, if you need to convince people about something, you can also show them why you want to do something over something else. Speaking of AI earlier, I know that some people are worried that AI may replace language learning or even language teaching, certainly language interpreting and translation, but I think that AI has a space in our classrooms as a tool, as a means to an end, but not as an end in itself. because what people, again, employers and then economic, the neoliberal framing of things, that the most in-demand skills are looking for people who have the people skills, human skills, communication, collaboration, compassion, empathy, and those are that are truly human, that cannot be automated out. So AI should not be our enemy. We can still use AI to practice the language that we are learning, but we shouldn't be relying on AI to communicate with other people, unless in certain emergencies. But I think there is a huge value in us learning another language because of all of these different things. So why that push towards bilingualism? As we talked earlier, bilingualism gives this benefit in terms of soft skills, or they're also known as, essential skills. They're not soft skills. Mental adaptability, better problem-solving skills, sharper mental perceptions, attention to detail. Also, people who are bi or multilingual have better, richer access to social networks. And then finally, again, the economic advantages that sometimes people give their employees, pay them more if they're bilingual. And sometimes bilinguals are even employed in positions that are more varied or that are more diverse, even when bilingualism is not a requirement of the job. So there are so many benefits to it. So at the same time, all of these things that we talk about, like the benefits of bilingualism, are in fact the things that employers are looking for. So if we want to prepare our students for the world after school, the language is the way to go, because in addition to learning a language, people are getting all these other skills that employers are looking for. So who are our allies? I already mentioned some of them, but and these are not like people, unfortunately, but I still consider them our allies. There's a lot of out there that we can access and share in various contexts where we are. So this is an infographic that the Office of English Language Acquisition has come up with. It's just like a one-pager that can be used for, when we are advocating or talking about not only the economic benefits of learning other languages, but all these other ones as well. Another one is this framework that was released in 2017 from our own Department of Education that is about developing global and cultural competencies as a means to advance equity, excellence, and economic competitiveness. And then they have these 4 domains: collaboration and communication, world and heritage languages, diverse perspectives, and civic and global engagement. And it shows what each of these domains can or should look like at the various educational levels. So what I love about it is, of course, proficient in at least 2 languages is a globally and culturally competent individual as to what they should be. But it can be used as a reality check or as a roadmap of what people should be doing in their own context. This is another one that is about employability skills. So world languages and employability skills were mapped onto this, another infographic from EXPO that shows how, it's not 2 separate things, they overlap, and how we can do this, how we can convince people of all these things. And again, you can Google this and you can download it for free. You can post it on people's walls or talk about it at board meetings and things like that. This is a report from the American Council for Teaching of Foreign Languages. They also asked employers what they're looking for, what kind of needs they have, and 9 out of 10 showed that they rely on people who have language skills. They also showed that they expect that world language demand will increase in the next 5 years, and that they also have a foreign language gap, that they have lost business due to a lack of foreign language skills. Also, these are the top 5 departments which have the greatest foreign language skills needs. So you can see it's not just customer service. We need people who are bilingual in sales, marketing, management, IT, and so on. In terms of languages, the most in demand is Spanish, but of course there is a demand for other languages as well. Some people might think, well, no one wants to learn my language, or no one wants to need that language. There is still demand. You just need to find where that demand for that language is. And this is another graph that also shows how much US-based employers rely on employees with foreign language skills by different sectors. So we have the green means a lot, the purple means some, and if we compare the two, for all of them, then it's almost 80 or close to 80%. And yeah, in terms, I've been mentioning the dual language programs quite a lot today, but this is because nationally there is a growing trend of these programs, and currently there are about 3,600 programs across the US, and these are by numbers. This is, I think, we are currently in this, well, when this was done in 2022, I think, we had 50, but now we have, well, at the time we had, I think, 44, but now we're over 50. And we're not surprised that the biggest number of these programs are in California and Texas, but there is overall a growing trend of these types of programs. These are the different languages that are offered in these types of programs. Spanish is, again, the most common one, but there are programs in Greek, there are programs in Haitian Creole, in Polish, in Russian, and Arabic, and all those other languages as well, and even in less commonly taught languages. Another of our allies is the Seal of Biliteracy. How many of you are familiar with the Seal of Biliteracy? Maybe someone has earned it? Not yet. The other day I teach an online course this spring semester, and one of the students was sharing that she's earned it, and it was like such a moment for me. I'm like, oh, you're the first one I've known in Indiana that has earned it. But this is something that came out of California in 2014, and the seal is a seal that gets attached to students' high school diploma, and it shows that they're proficient in 2 languages. And at the time, these were like in dark blue, these were the states that had a seal. Now every state has one. A few weeks ago, we were in danger of losing it. There was an action of not wanting it anymore, but there was some advocacy that was done that we still are a seal of biliteracy state. And it's that asset-based perspective. It's recognizing, yeah, it's great that you're able to speak one or other language or more than one language. Colleagues of ours from University of Minnesota just recently released this national toolkit for state seals of biliteracy, because in different states there are different minimum requirements about the levels that people should have, but they have also great infographics that are adapted for students, adapted for educators, for families, or for employers, even for higher ed administrators. And many of these, even like a one-pager documents, are available in multiple languages. So it's another thing that we can rely on. This is something that was also recently released from our Raise the Bar initiative, and unfortunately only 1% currently of Indiana students are earning the seal. So this to me is a room for growth. We could be getting more people who are earning these seals. So I think California currently is the one that has the biggest number, but even 13% is not, I think, big enough. So why should we start with language instruction early? Those of you who are familiar with ACTFL and the proficiency levels may have seen this before, but it shows that if we start learning another language in 9th grade, by 10th grade they can only get to the, like not even to the intermediate level. If we start in kindergarten and then we continue offering that language all the way through high school, they can reach an advanced range of that proficiency. So this is why we need early language learning. It's pure math. It's the hours we spend learning the language. Earlier with the students, we also talked about is this distinction between social language, which is also called BICS, Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, and CALP, which is the academic language, and then knowing that it takes 1 to 3 years to acquire social language, and then it takes between 5 and 7 years to acquire academic language, is something that we also need to educate non-language people, or people who are against these things, or who say, well, they've been studying and they didn't learn it after a year. Well, of course they didn't. We need more time to be spent in that language. This is another thing, and it shows that how even the definitions of what it means to be bilingual or multilingual has changed. Because in the past it used to be very black and white. You had to be like native like proficiency to be considered bilingual. Whereas now, because of the way things are shown in various in ACTFL, in the WIDA assessments, and in various language organizations in TESOL, they all show that even at a basic level, what you know, what you're able to do. So for example, even if I'm novice low, I can introduce myself, or I can say some phrases that I've memorized. So it doesn't show all the things that I don't know, but it emphasizes that even though I may be novice mid or novice low, there are some things that I can still do in language. So this is this conception of bilingualism as a continuum, and that as bilinguals, we could be at different points on this continuum in time. This was here, S stands for Spanish, and S here means purely monolingual Spanish speakers. E is English, purely English speakers. SE are those balanced bilinguals who are in reality very rare. But then if someone knows two languages at different points in time, depending on circumstances and depending on language used, they could be at different points on this continuum. I always mention how if I were to give this presentation in Macedonian, I would stutter. I would do it, but Macedonian is my first language, right? So, but it's because I've been doing all of this in my professional life with a little bit in English. But if I do it enough, if I do it twice in Macedonian, it will be equally easy for me to get that ability back again. So here in Indiana, the seal of biliteracy is called Certificate of Multilingual Proficiency. It was with a bill that was passed in 2015 that we became that kind of a state. And here in Indiana, students need to reach an intermediate high level to earn the seal in high school. So here, as I mentioned, in Indiana in 2015, there were only 3 dual language programs. Now there are 56 in 27 different districts. And the closest one to here is in Washington Community Schools. And the growth is in line with these national trends, but also the Indiana Department of Education has been providing pilot funds for schools to start these programs. This is some oral proficiency levels in the workplace. I haven't made copies of this, but this is another one of our allies that shows that, like, these are the proficiency levels, like novice, low, mid, high, intermediate, low, intermediate, mid, and then these are the language functions, what people can do. I know it's very blurry, but I can tell you what it is, and you can take a copy if you are interested in this. But these are the different professions that correspond to the different levels. So if someone is intermediate mid, what they can do. They can be a cashier, they can be a sales clerk. Then teachers are here, advanced low. If we want someone to be a language teacher in K-12 context, they have to be advanced low. And then can they reach an advanced low if they started learning another language in high school, right? So that's again that same thinking. So again, that why intermediate high, because there's nothing that they can do work-wise if they are only intermediate low. So that's why that threshold for the certificate of multilingual proficiency here in Indiana is intermediate mid. Intermediate high. So that was just what I talked about. And this is just some more statistics from our own IDEO, Indiana Department of Ed. There has been a 103% increase in English learner population here in Indiana since 2016. Then this also shows the number of people who have earned, this is preliminary data, that have earned the seal now in the previous school year. These are the different languages, but there have been even other languages that people have been tested in. And then finally, this is just the type of students that have earned it and how the growth of the people who have been getting this certificate has grown from about 600 in 2021 to a little over 1,000 now in 2024. So what can we do? I don't know if you're familiar with, but there's like the United Nations has something which is called the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Has someone seen them? It's a very great framework. There are 17 of them, and the whole world is working towards achieving them, and they are like zero hunger, quality education. There are 17 of them, and the whole world knows about them, but here in the United States, not many know about them. And the United Nations has created this lazy person's guide to saving the world. It's funny, but I was inspired by that, and I created one for saving language programs. So, and they have these 4 levels at which we can operate. So the things that we can do from our couches at home to save language programs. We can use apps to learn languages. We can use subtitle, or we can use, I know that's how I learned a lot of English, because all the movies in Macedonian were subtitled, so I was hearing a lot of English, in addition to English being the language of power. But you could change the settings on your TV and watch it with like dubbed or with the subtitles in a different language, or use dictionaries, use bilingual books, change the language on your phone, or read books about language learning and so on. Things that we can do in classrooms, especially if we're teachers, we can connect with classrooms in other parts of the world. These are foundations that offer free connections with classroom to classroom with other people who may be speakers or learners of that language. So people can then invite guest speakers of those languages in the country. People can be more tolerant of errors, because errors and mistakes are part of the language learning. They advocate for the seal of biliteracy, and then serve as a role model in our communities. Things that we can do in the school, at the school level, especially if you are an educator. Again, we become a school that offers the opportunity for students to earn that, have bilingual signs, have talk at parent meetings about all these things that I just talked about today. Attend school board meetings and advocate for these types of programs. Use the different information that is already out there, and then also help with community partnerships. Sometimes I know that here in Indiana, there's many of those foreign-owned companies may want more Japanese speakers. I know here with Toyota, I know that may be the case, and there may be other places like that as well. And then things that you can do in your state: join language associations, national or state associations. The Indiana Department of Education has great resources there as well. Then you can also advocate at state level. You can attend hearings and some of those sessions. This is the Joint National Committee for Languages that have like the language advocacy days. I think it's sometime now, February or early March. And yeah, so I also want to wrap up by encouraging that it might seem that we're like islands, isolated, and there's nothing I can do as an individual, but I do believe in the power of one, that even though you might think that you cannot make a change, we are able to make that change. So I would like to urge you to do something about that, and just by you being here, I feel like you believe in the benefits of language learning and in bilingualism. So I want you to just know that there's a lot of out there that can help you with in your efforts to become bilingual or multilingual. So thank you all.